Part 3, Fighting. The Sisters. The radio station I listen to is state-owned, so it is free of advertising, and news programs alternate with the latest hit songs. The next station on the dial is privately owned. There is advertising instead of music, but the ads resemble the latest hits to such an extent that I never know what station I am listening to, and as I doze off again and again, I know it even less. In my drowsy state, I learn that since the war, 2 million people have been killed on the roads of Europe. In France alone, highway accidents have caused, on average, 10,000 deaths and 300,000 injuries per year. A whole army of the legless, handless, earless, eyeless. Deputy Bertrand, a name as beautiful as a lullaby, incensed by these terrible statistics, did something remarkable. But at that point, I fell asleep and learned the story only half an hour later, when the same news item was repeated. Deputy Bertrand, a name as beautiful as a lullaby, proposed in Parliament that beer advertising should be banned. This caused a great uproar in the National Assembly. Many deputies opposed the idea, supported by representatives of the radio and TV, who would lose money as a result. Then came the voice of Bertrand himself. He talked of the fight against death, the fight for life. During his short speech, the word fight was repeated at least 5 times, and this immediately reminded me of my native land, of Prague, of banners, posters, the fight for peace, the fight for happiness, the fight for justice, the fight for the future. The fight for peace. A fight for peace that ends with the destruction of everybody by everybody. The Czech people wisely add. But now I am asleep again. Every time somebody pronounces the name Bertrand, I fall into a deep slumber. And when I wake up, I hear some comments about gardening, so I quickly turn the dial to the next station. I hear a report about Deputy Bertrand, or about the proposed ban on beer advertising. Slowly, I begin to grasp the logical connections. People are killed on highways as if they were on a battlefield, but it is impossible to ban cars because they are the pride of modern man. A certain percentage of accidents is caused by drunken drivers, but wine cannot be banned, for it is the time-honored glory of France. A certain percentage of drunkenness is caused by beer, but beer, too, cannot be banned, because it would violate all the international free trade agreements. A certain percentage of people who drink beer are motivated to drink by advertising, and here is the enemy's Achilles heel. Here is the point where the brave deputy decided to strike. Long live Bertrand, I tell myself. But because that name affects me like a lullaby, I fall asleep at once until I am awakened by a seductive velvet voice. Yes, it is Bernard the announcer, and as if all the news concerned nothing but highway accidents, he reports the following. Last night, a girl sat down on a highway with her back to the oncoming traffic. 3 cars, one after the other, managed to swerve aside at the last moment and ended up in the ditch, all smashed up, with a number of dead and injured. The suicidal girl herself, when she realized her lack of success, slipped from the scene, and only the mutually consistent testimony of the injured bore witness to her existence. That report strikes me as so horrible that I cannot go back to sleep. That report strikes me as so horrible that I cannot go back to sleep. There's nothing to do but get up, have some breakfast, and sit down at my writing desk. But for a long while, I simply couldn't concentrate. I saw that girl sitting on the dark highway, hunched down, her forehead pressed to her knees, and I heard the screams rising from the ditch. I had to force myself to get rid of this image in order to be able to continue with my novel, which, if you remember, began with my waiting at the swimming pool for Professor Avenarius and seeing an unknown woman wave to the lifeguard. We saw that gesture again when Agnes was standing in front of her house saying goodbye to her shy school friend. Agnes continued to use that gesture whenever a boy took her home after a date and walked her to the garden gate. Her little sister Laura would hide behind a bush and wait for Agnes to return home. She wanted to see the kiss and to watch her sister walk to the front door. She waited for the moment when Agnes turned around and lifted her arm in the air. This movement conjured up a misty idea of love, which Laura knew nothing about, but which would always remain connected in her mind with the image of her attractive, gentle sister. When Agnes caught Laura borrowing her gesture in order to wave to her friends, it upset her, and as we know, ever since then she took leave of her lovers soberly and without outward display. In this short history of a gesture, we can recognize the mechanism determining the relationship of the two sisters. The younger one imitated the elder, reached out her arm toward her, but at the last moment Agnes would always escape. After she left the Lycée, Agnes moved to Paris to study at the university. Laura reproached her sister for having left their beloved countryside, but after graduation she, too, went to Paris to study. Agnes took up mathematics. After she had received her degree, everyone predicted a great scholarly career for her. But instead of continuing her research, she married Paul and took a well-paid yet commonplace job without any prospects of glory. Laura regretted that when she herself entered the Paris Conservatoire. She determined to make up for her sister's lack of success and become glorious in her stead. One day, Agnes introduced her to Paul. At the very first sight of him, Laura heard an invisible someone saying to her, "There is a man, a real man, the only man, no other exists." Who was that invisible person? Was it perhaps Agnes herself? Yes, it was she, pointing out the way to her sister and yet at the same time claiming that way for herself. Agnes and Paul were kind to Laura and took such good care of her that she felt as much at home in Paris as she had in her hometown. Yet the happy sense of staying within the family embrace was darkened by the melancholy knowledge that the only man she could ever have loved was at the same time the only man she must never try to win. When she spent time with the couple, moods of happiness alternated with bouts of sorrow. She would grow silent, gaze into space, and Agnes would take her by the hand and say, "What's the matter, Laura? What's the matter, my little sister?" Sometimes, in the same situation and moved by a similar motive, Paul, too, took her by the hand, and all three would happily plunge into a voluptuous hot bath fed by many streams of feeling, sisterly and amorous, compassionate and sensual. Then she married. Agnes's daughter, Bridget, was 10 years old when Laura decided to give her a present of a small cousin. She begged her husband to make her pregnant, which was readily accomplished but ended in grief. Laura had a miscarriage, and the doctors told her that she could never have a child without undergoing serious surgery.